I met Alyssa while still in college, and we became good friends, never developing into anything romantic. After graduation, I started my own web design and graphics company that, at first, barely paid the bills, but eventually grew into something that flourished, especially after landing 3 consecutive contracts that put my name on the top-tier list for small home-based businesses. One of those accounts was a local outdoor gear retailer that was making big moves after purchasing a bankrupt competitor and was in need of a new website and app store. So I met with several top executives in a meeting to discuss details. That's where I saw her, Alyssa. The same Alyssa from college who was now working as a public relation manager for the store and was now assigned as liaison to me for the duration of this project. Long story short, we reconnected, and then after some time we were married in a small ceremony at the coast. That was 3 years ago. During that time we purchased a nice home in a quiet neighborhood and almost immediately made friends with Owen and Jenna Wilson. Our house faced an adjoining street, so we actually had a decent view. Their home was on that street, 2 houses down. We moved in about 18 months ago and began to notice that Owen and Jenna would hold parties at their home about every 6 weeks. During one of these parties, one of the guests parked in such a way to partially block my driveway. I noticed the car from my upstairs office and watched as a man and woman climbed out, then walked down the street to the Wilson house. I looked confused as to why they felt the need to park so far away and technically on a different street. I got up from my desk and went downstairs, slipped on my shoes, and went outside to examine the vehicle, finding nothing out of place except for the fact it was half blocking my driveway. So I started walking to their house and up the walk to the front door. For a party, there wasn't a lot of party noise, no loud music, no dancing, just an unusual calm that gave me an unusual feeling. I rang the bell and waited, and a few moments later Jenna answered the door with a huge smile that dropped as soon as she saw me. Jenna was dressed or undressed, depending on perspective, in a see-through baby doll dress, holding a wine glass with her free hand, leaving nothing to the imagination. Behind her, he could see shadows, sounds, and mood lighting of a full-on swingers event in the background. She made a half-hearted attempt to cover herself, failing miserably. Hi, she stammered. I thought you were someone else. I see that and now understand what these parties are all about. I proclaimed, trying not to look out of place. I really didn't mean to disturb you, but one of your guests parked blocking my driveway and thought I would see if I could get them to move. Oh dear. She looked in the direction of my house, then said, I'm so sorry. I will get them to move it right away. Thanks. I replied, then bid goodnight and walked back home. Upon entering my house, Alyssa immediately noticed that something was off and asked, You okay, honey? Looking concerned. Yeah, but just found out that Owen and Jenna are swingers, and those parties they throw are their get-togethers. I said matter-of-factly. Alyssa looked shocked. Are you sure? She asked incredulously. I'm sure, shrugging my shoulders. The next day, Jenna knocked on the door. Alyssa answered and let her in as I came down the stairs to see who it was. I wanted to explain last night. Jenna stated tentatively. No need, I said. I get it. You live a certain type of lifestyle, and if it works for you, who am I to judge? Jenna looked relieved. I was worried that it might affect our friendship, that you would look at us differently considering our hobbies are often frowned upon generally. Alyssa sat next to Jenna on the couch and grabbed her hand and smiled sweetly. I will be honest, Jenna. I might not agree with it, but what you do in your private life doesn't affect our friendship, and I'm sure Craig would agree. I simply nodded in agreement, and Jenna smiled and hugged Alyssa, then excused herself, heading for the door, stopping briefly and looking back at me, stating, And I will be sure that no one parks in your driveway again. She giggled and then left before I could answer. A few weeks later, as I came home from running chores, I found Alyssa in the kitchen preparing lunch. She looked up at me as I entered, and she smiled, kissed me on the lips, then handed me a sandwich she had prepared, and then looked at me mischievously. I need to talk to you about something. She looked at me somewhat apprehensively. Those dreaded words that no married man ever wants to hear, but I steeled myself and told her to continue. I have been talking to Jenna about some things and wanted to ask you something. Oh God. My thoughts immediately went to the worst possible scenario I could conjure up, and my mind went to the possibility that Jenna was trying to seduce her into the open marriage swinger lifestyle. Would you be open to a little experimentation? Alyssa asked with a hopeful look. What kind of experimentation? I asked nervously. You know, in the bedroom. I looked at her questionably. Let me understand this. You have been talking to Jenna about experimentation in our bedroom between just you and me? I asked, dreading what the answer might be. Of course. What else did you think I was talking about? Alyssa looked confused. Honestly, I thought you were leading into the idea of opening our marriage considering that Jenna is into the lifestyle. I exclaimed. No, no. Alyssa grabbed my arm playfully. I'm not into that. I just was curious when we found out about their lifestyle and started asking questions, and Jenna made some suggestions that she thought we could use in our own relationship. Relief washed over me, and I felt a little guilty for assuming the worst. Over the next few weeks, our sex life exploded with Alyssa pushing boundaries that I never knew existed. I mean, I'm no saint, but holy cow, there was definitely a lot more I didn't know than I did. She dressed very provocatively whenever she was home and always tried to initiate love-making whenever she could. It felt like we were teenagers again, and I had no cause for complaint. That weekend, I ran into Jenna and Owen while out shopping, and Jenna asked with a mischievous grin, "Hey, Craig, so how's it going?" A question by itself an innocent one, but knowing the context, knew exactly what she was inferring. I'm not one to talk shop, or in this case bedroom, but whatever you have been talking about to Alyssa has paid off in spades. I'm eternally grateful. I couldn't help but smile. Jenna answered, I'm glad I could help. You guys are great friends. I nodded, said my goodbyes, then finished shopping, then went home. Over the next few weeks, our love life flourished. Alyssa kept exploring her sexuality, spurred on by her conversations with Jenna, but as the saying goes, all good things must come to an end. One night, after an especially energetic session of lovemaking, Alyssa asked the question I had been dreading since her talks with Jenna began. What do you think about opening the marriage? She asked quietly. My heart sank. In my experience, a question like that often wasn't just curiosity. It was a request for permission, maybe even a retroactive excuse. I got out of bed as if I'd touched a live wire. Why would you ask that? You know how I feel about it. Is there someone you have in mind? Or is this just hypothetical? My rapid-fire questions betrayed my fear. Alyssa sat up, looking concerned. No, of course not. There's no one. I've just been curious, and my talks with Jenna brought it up. Maybe you shouldn't be talking to Jenna about her and Owen's lifestyle, I said, my voice harsher than I intended. It's starting to affect our relationship, and I'm sure you don't want that. Her reaction was curious rather than angry, which made me think she might be telling the truth. Still, I was on my guard and made a mental note to watch more closely. Alyssa never brought it up again, but something had shifted. She was still affectionate and sexual, yet a heaviness settled over me that I couldn't explain. The first late night was almost expected. She came home 3 hours late and, when I confronted her, simply said it was a company meeting. I nodded but noticed something off, an irritation I couldn't place. For the first time in weeks, she didn't initiate intimacy, going through the motions of dinner, a shower, and bed. After she fell asleep, I pried her phone from her hand. Yes, she now slept with it, and started to look through it. The password had changed, but she wasn't very inventive, and what I found wasn't what I expected. She hadn't been at work. Texts showed she'd been out with coworkers at a nearby bar. Worse, she'd been flirting aggressively with a colleague while he tried to keep her at arm's length, finally threatening to go to HR if she didn't stop. I made a decision at this point to install a spyware app that would allow me to read her text messages. Guilt flooded me, but I was now convinced that this was the only way to get at the truth. I slipped the phone back into her hand as she slept heavily, trying to process what I'd just read. Why was she acting this way at work? What was happening? The next morning, she was up before me. When I walked into the kitchen, she was wearing a very short skirt. I stopped. Are you wearing that to work? I asked, concerned. Why not? She said, almost flippant. Don't you think that might be a little inappropriate considering? I caught myself. Considering what? She snapped. Nothing, I muttered. I'll probably be late again tonight, she said. I cringed. Is it really necessary? I was hoping to spend time with you. Yes, she answered flatly. The company's remodeling the store, so we all have to help with product placement. Product placement? I repeated, confused. You know, moving stuff to clear the floor for construction. She aggressively animated the motions, clearly losing patience. I said nothing more as she grabbed her coat, purse, and keys and walked out without a kiss or goodbye. I stood there stunned. This was so unlike her. I couldn't remember the last time she'd completely ignored me. I told myself I needed to get to the bottom of it. I sat for a moment, staring at my phone, then scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. "Hey," I said when she answered. "Do you have time to talk?" A pause. "Yes, about Alyssa." An hour later, Jenna knocked on my door. "Craig, you look worried. What's going on?" I met her eyes. "I know you've been talking to her about exploring her sexuality in our bedroom, but she's starting to act like our relationship isn't enough anymore." Jenna's expression tightened. When she came to me, she said she just wanted to feel more confident. I only encouraged her to be honest about her needs. "I know," I said quickly. "I'm not blaming you. I'm just worried. She's been trying to seduce some of her coworkers. This morning she left wearing clothes that left very little to the imagination, and I'm kind of freaking out." My voice rose with each sentence. "How do you even know what's happening at her work?" Jenna asked. I hesitated, ashamed. "I went through her phone last night. I found texts with a coworker she went out with. Apparently, she tried to seduce him, and he threatened to go to HR if she didn't back off." I exhaled. "And now she says she's staying out late again, and I can only assume she's looking for someone else to explore with." I actually made air quotes at the word. Shock crossed Jenna's face. "I had no idea. When we talked, she said she just wanted to spice up her sex life with you, not take it outside. I feel partly responsible. Sometimes when people push boundaries in one part of their lives, it spills over, but I thought Alyssa knew the difference between private exploration and workplace behavior." "Exactly," I said. "She seems to think this new openness applies everywhere." "Let me talk to her," Jenna offered. "I can reframe it. Make it clear her freedom and confidence are valid, but those boundaries have to stay at home." "I'd appreciate that. I don't want to shut her down, but I don't want this to get out of hand. You know how I feel about open relationships." My stomach churned. I couldn't bear to imagine what I'd do if Alyssa cheated on me. Jenna softened. "I know, Craig. I'll talk to her after work. Catch her as she leaves the office. I think she's just overwhelmed and needs some guidance." "I hope you're right," I said. "Thank you. I just want to dial this back before it's too late." She gave me a quick hug and left. As I shut the door, the dread inside me eased slightly, but the doubts refused to go away. I was at the kitchen table when the door opened. Alyssa came in, her cheeks flushed and her eyes bright. She set her purse on the counter and looked at me, almost eager. "Long day?" I asked tentatively. "I was with Jenna," she said before I could ask. "We talked about us." My stomach tightened. "About what exactly?" She pulled out a chair and sat across from me, leaning forward. "About how we've been holding back. About how we could explore more, together. Craig, you could be part of this journey with me. We could try new things, open ourselves up." I blinked. "You're talking about opening the marriage, aren't you?" "I have told you." She cut me off, but nodded. "Yes. Not sneaking around, not cheating. Doing it together. Jenna and Owen make it work, and she thinks we could too. I want you with me, Craig." The floor seemed to tilt under me. "Alyssa, Jenna's been trying to help you spice up our marriage, not copy her lifestyle. She knows how I feel about this and told you to focus on us." "That's what I'm trying to do," she said, frustration creeping into her voice. "I'm giving you the chance to come with me." "You know I can't," I said quietly. "You know how I feel about open relationships. That's not who I am, and I will not share my wife with other men." She stared at me for a heartbeat, then slammed her hands on the table. "So that's it? You're just going to hold me back? You're so small, Craig. You're not enough for me anymore." Her sudden change in demeanor and her words hit like a slap. "Alyssa, I'm done pretending," she snapped, pushing back her chair. "If you won't give me what I need, I'll take it myself." Jenna invited me to their next swinger party. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself. "She invited you?" "Yes," she said, eyes blazing. "And I'm going. With or without you." "No, you're not," I said determinedly. "If you go, our marriage is over." She blinked at me, a flicker of hurt in her eyes before she crossed her arms. "Craig, I don't want to lose you. I keep hoping you'll come with me instead of threatening to leave. I want you in this with me." She looked at me as if studying a new product. "But you're not serious. You're just trying to scare me into staying the way things are. You've always been too cautious to walk away." She then turned and walked upstairs to the bedroom where I could hear her turn on the shower. I sat there, stunned, feeling the marriage I thought we had slipping through my fingers. I grabbed my coat and my keys and left the house. I needed air, to think, to plan. Was my marriage really over? Was I going to sit here like a fool and let her walk over the top of me while it was happening? I didn't know where I was going until I saw the glow of a big box hardware store and swung into the lot. The absurdity hit me even as I walked inside. Here I was, wandering the aisles under harsh fluorescent lights, telling myself that if she actually walked out to betray me, I'd change the locks before she came back. Deadbolts. As if new locks could keep my marriage from falling apart. I picked up a box and turned it over in my hands, feeling the weight of the metal, when a voice behind me said, "Craig?" I turned. Jenna stood at the end of the aisle, a basket on her arm, her brow furrowed in concern. Of all the people to run into here, tonight. Jenna's eyes dropped to the deadbolt clutched in my fist, then back up to my face. "Craig, are you all right? You look." "Don't," I snapped, stepping back. "Don't you dare act concerned." She blinked. "What? What happened? What happened?" My voice cracked, rising in the empty aisle. "You happened. You and your great advice. You've been whispering all this exploration garbage into Alyssa's ear, and now she thinks she needs an open marriage. She's about to blow up everything we built, and you're standing here asking me if I'm all right." Jenna's mouth opened, but I cut her off, heat surging in my chest. Just fuck off, Jenna. You destroyed my marriage. Stay out of my life." I dropped the deadbolt back onto the shelf, turned on my heel, and strode down the aisle and out the door, throwing the basket onto the stack. Behind me, I heard her say my name, soft and shocked, but I didn't look back and kept walking toward my car, needing distance from everything, from her, from Alyssa, from the version of my life that was unraveling. "Craig, wait," she called, breaking into a run. I turned to see her furiously texting on her phone, an SOS to Owen. I found out. "Craig, stop," she said, tugging at me gently but insistently. "Come with me. Let's sit for a second." I hesitated, the pulse in my temple thundering, but her persistence left me no choice. She led me a few steps to a nearby bench, sitting me down and keeping her hand on my arm as if holding me in place. "What is this all about? Tell me, Craig," Jenna pleaded. "Jenna, I'm sorry. I've just been so distressed. Everything is falling apart, and my voice trembled. But why would you invite Alyssa to one of your parties knowing how I feel about them?" Jenna's brow furrowed as she shook her head quickly. "Craig, I didn't invite her. I would never go behind your back like that. I think Alyssa must have misinterpreted part of our conversation. I spoke hypothetically, saying that if you two were ever invited, it would have to be as a couple. I never meant for her to take it as permission to go on her own." At this moment, Owen ran up, having received Jenna's SOS text, and I let Jenna fill him in on everything that had led up to this moment, alleviating me of having to recount the painful conversation all over again. Jenna eased herself down beside me on the bench and, without a word, slipped her hand over mine, a small steadying pressure that I didn't know I needed. Owen stayed standing in front of us, setting his shopping bag down, his voice calm but deliberate. "We don't normally talk about our lifestyle without outsiders, at least in great detail, but considering what is going on here, I think there are some things you should know about us." I looked up at him while he and Jenna exchanged glances, with her nodding her approval. "We have what you might call house rules. Every house has them, and they vary, but most are fundamentally the same. As you can imagine, our way of life is not as popular as some would have you believe, and many think people like us are very reckless, so we are very careful of who we invite." I sat there silently waiting for him to continue. "The first thing is we only invite couples, and, with rare exceptions, both partners must attend together. Second," he continued, "in our house, both partners must be involved. We do not allow for one to play and the other simply to stand in the corner and watch." He paused, looking at me for reaction, but finding none, he continued. "And finally, if at any time one or the other partner has doubts, concerns, or second thoughts, both are asked to leave immediately. Everyone understands these rules, and they are gone over before each party, so there is no misunderstanding." I shifted on the bench, Jenna's hand still over mine. "What about the exceptions?" I asked quietly, my throat dry. "You said there were very rare ones. What does that mean?" Jenna answered before Owen could. "The only time is when one partner is sick, out of town, or otherwise occupied," she said softly. "And even then it's only after a FaceTime call where the absent partner gives explicit permission for the other to attend. We only extend that courtesy to members who've been to several parties already and who are very well known and trusted in our circles." Jenna's explanation settled over me like a weight. I squeezed her hand once, then looked up at Owen. "So if Alyssa just shows up," I said slowly, she'd have to be turned away under your own rules, right? Jenna's eyes softened, but her voice stayed firm. Yes, Craig. If she showed up on her own, we'd have to turn her away. Those rules aren't suggestions. They're there to protect everyone. Even Alyssa. Owen nodded and leaned forward a little, his tone taking on a harder edge. And there's a legal side too, he said. If just anyone wandered in and a marriage blew up because of something that happened under our roof, we could be facing lawsuits for facilitating it. That's why we vet everyone, why we insist on couples, and why we shut things down the moment someone shows second thoughts. It protects us, but it also protects the people who come through our door. Jenna squeezed my hand again and looked up at Owen. Maybe it's time for an intervention, she said. Not a lecture. Just the three of us sitting her down, calmly explaining what she's misunderstood. Owen gave a slow, thoughtful nod. If you're willing, Craig, we can do that. It might be the only way to pull her back before she crosses a line she can't uncross. I glanced from one to the other and, for the first time that night, felt a small flicker of hope. Okay, I said. Let's do it. By the time I pulled into our driveway, my stomach was a stone. The lights were on upstairs. I unlocked the door quietly, stepped inside, and heard the sound of drawers opening and closing. Alyssa, my voice echoed up the stairwell. When I reached the bedroom, she was by the open closet, a half-zipped suitcase on the bed. Clothes and shoes were strewn across the floor. She was dressed in a tight, low-cut top and a short skirt with thigh-high stockings, makeup heavier than I'd ever seen her wear at home. For a second I just stood there, my heart hammering. What are you doing? I asked, the words catching in my throat. She glanced over her shoulder at me, eyes blazing. I'm leaving for a while, she snapped. I can't breathe in this house anymore. I stepped closer, still stunned. Leaving for where? Like this. I gestured at the suitcase, at her outfit. Alyssa, talk to me. Please. Craig, I need you to understand. I can't keep pretending everything's fine. I feel like I'm suffocating. Her voice wavered, but then sharpened. You won't even try to understand me, to join me, to be part of this. You just want to control me and keep me boxed in. She slammed a drawer shut, her face flushing. I've spent years making you happy, and now when I need something you act like I'm betraying you. Maybe I should go. Maybe you don't deserve to know where. Maybe you'll finally see I'm serious. Before I could respond, Alyssa spun on her heel and stormed out of the room. My chest tightened as I heard her furious footsteps pounding down the stairs. I barely had time to react before the front door opened and Jenna and Owen stepped inside, their eyes immediately locking on the chaos in the living room. Alyssa skidded to a stop when she saw Jenna in the doorway, and her furious expression softened into something almost like a grin. Jenna, thank God you're here, she said, her voice lighter, relief and warmth creeping in. She rushed forward and threw her arms around Jenna in a quick, eager hug. I don't know what I'd do without you. You get me, you really do. Jenna wrapped her arms around her in return, a steady presence. I know, Alyssa, she said gently. That's why I'm here. Let's sit down and talk, just for a few minutes, okay? Alyssa lingered in her embrace, letting her anger fade slightly as she turned toward me only briefly, a flicker of conflict in her eyes. Alyssa stayed close to Jenna, her arms still lightly draped around her shoulders, and Jenna knelt slightly to meet her eyes. Alyssa, listen to me, she said softly. I understand that you're feeling overwhelmed and curious, but I think you might have misunderstood some of our earlier conversations. I never meant to tell you that going out on your own was okay. I only wanted to help you explore things safely with Craig, together. Alyssa nodded slowly at first, her expression softening. Then her hands fidgeted with the hem of her skirt. I thought you were on my side, she whispered. Jenna gave her a gentle squeeze. I am, but being on your side doesn't mean letting things get out of control. I want you to be free and happy, but not at the cost of hurting yourself or your marriage. I and Owen stayed quiet, our presence silent but steady, letting the two of them talk without interrupting. For a moment she seemed to soften, hanging on Jenna's words, but then something snapped. Her eyes widened, fire replacing any trace of calm. You're lying. You're all lying, she screamed, shoving Jenna back with more force than I expected. Jenna stumbled but held her ground, her hands raised defensively. Alyssa, calm down. I started, but she spun on me mid-step, rage twisting her features. And you've been turning them against me this whole time, haven't you? You've been plotting with them, haven't you? She lunged again at Jenna, pushing her against the wall, fingers digging into her shoulders, and I froze, my pulse hammering. How could you both betray me like this? I trusted you. Her voice broke between screams, and I felt a cold dread wash over me, realizing how far this had escalated. Jenna, pressed against the wall, let out a sharp exhale and slapped Alyssa across the face in self-defense. Alyssa staggered back, and Jenna's eyes went wide in shock. Up close, she could see the whites of Alyssa's eyes had turned a vivid, fiery red, not figuratively, not illustratively, but literally. Alyssa froze for a moment, her hands flying to her cheek, and then without warning collapsed to the floor. Everything after Alyssa collapsed was a blur. I remember dropping to my knees beside her, my hands shaking, Jenna kneeling on the other side, her voice low and soothing, trying to talk to her, and Owen barking instructions, calling for help, telling me to stay calm while I fumbled for my phone. The sound of my own voice, the panic in theirs, and the sight of her lying there, it all blended together into a haze. I don't even remember hanging up the call before the paramedics arrived. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in the sterile hospital waiting room, my hands clasped tightly together, my heart hammering, Jenna beside me holding my arm, and Owen pacing a few steps away, murmuring quietly under his breath. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the waiting felt endless, every minute stretching into eternity as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. As I sat there, still barely processing the chaos, my pocket buzzed. I glanced down and saw the burner phone I'd completely forgotten about lighting up. My stomach sank as I read the text. Until further notice, you have been suspended with pay pending an investigation for sexual misconduct. I felt a cold jolt run through me, my hands going clammy. The words swirled in my head, adding another layer of dread to the night. Jenna's hand tightened on my arm as she noticed the change in my expression. Owen, pacing nearby, looked up, his brow furrowed, but I couldn't speak, couldn't even lift my gaze from the screen. Everything I thought I had been controlling, everything I had feared happening, was now tangled in ways I couldn't untangle. I showed them the text, and neither asked the obvious question of the phone or its origin, but remained quiet as I struggled with the flood of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. The waiting room's muted lighting made everything feel suspended, like time itself had slowed. I sat perfectly still in one of the molded plastic chairs, hands resting on my knees, my face locked in whatever expressionless mask I could manage. I didn't blink much, didn't fidget, hardly even breathe deeply. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Jenna glancing at me now and then, her worry almost palpable. I could feel it even without looking at her. Owen had taken a seat a little apart from us, head bowed, his leg bouncing in a steady tremor. The only sounds were the hum of the vending machine and a nurse's voice drifting from the far desk. Finally, after untold hours, the door to the waiting room creaked open, and a man in pale blue scrubs stepped inside. He paused just long enough to scan the rows of chairs. His eyes fell on Owen, but he shook his head, so he then turned to me. "Mr. Harrington?" I didn't stand, and he approached, pulling up a chair across from me. Owen and Jenna sat close by so they could hear. "Craig Harrington, I'm Dr. Rahel Patel, the neurosurgeon called in specifically for your wife's case. What's happening is complicated. Explain it," I said, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. "Medical terms are fine. If I don't understand something, I'll stop you." He nodded once. "All right." Alyssa suffered a subarachnoid hemorrhage, sometimes called a sentinel bleed. It's bleeding into the space between the brain and the thin tissues covering it. In her case, the source appears to be an intracranial aneurysm, a weak, ballooned section of an artery that ruptured and has been leaking for some time. The surgery she is undergoing now is to relieve that pressure. I nodded, and the doctor continued. "We're performing a microsurgical clipping of the aneurysm to stop the bleeding, and at the same time placing a drain to remove the pooled blood and relieve the pressure. Once the aneurysm is secured and the blood evacuated, we'll monitor for vasospasm, narrowing of other arteries, which can happen after this kind of bleed." As I processed this information, the doctor looked at me carefully to access my level of understanding through my emotionless facade. "Do you have any questions or concerns?" He asked flatly. "Is she going to make it?" My voice cracked, the first sign of emotion I had displayed since coming to the hospital. Dr. Patel's eyes met mine, steady and calm. "Based on what we've seen so far, I'm confident we can get her through this. But these next few hours are critical. Nothing in the medical field is ever certain or 100%. We'll do everything we can, but I can't promise outcomes until the surgery is complete and the swelling is under control. I nodded, then asked, if she— I hesitated as I felt my voice giving out. Survives. Will she have any permanent brain damage or trauma from this? Dr. Patel's expression softened just slightly. With the kind of bleed she's had, there's always a risk of complications. But given her age, overall health, and the speed at which we intervened, I'm optimistic. Most likely, she'll recover fully. And her eyes? I asked cautiously. How is that related? Dr. Patel's expression stayed calm. That's a retinal or subconjunctival hemorrhage. Essentially, some of the tiny blood vessels in her eyes burst. It can happen spontaneously, often in conjunction with the sudden increase in pressure inside the skull from a brain bleed. So if she became enraged and somewhat violent, that might be enough to cause this secondary reaction? Yes, loosely, he said. The same pressure that caused the brain bleed can also stress fragile vessels elsewhere, including in the eyes. The body's delicate vascular system reacts to spikes in pressure, and sometimes multiple points give way almost at once. That's why you see these kinds of secondary bleeds in cases like hers. I nodded, then forced myself to ask the question that had been gnawing at me. Doctor, could this kind of trauma, could it cause changes in personality? Like aggression? Dr. Patel studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Yes, he said carefully. There are documented cases where a subarachnoid hemorrhage, aneurysm rupture, or the pressure caused by swelling in certain parts of the brain can lead to personality changes. Aggression, impulsive or violent behavior, hypersexuality, and disinhibition have all been observed in patients with similar injuries. I felt my stomach tighten, and I noticed Jenna immediately tensing up next to me. He continued, it depends on the location of the bleed and how the surrounding brain tissue responds. Some patients recover fully with no lasting personality effects. Others experience permanent changes. We won't know until she's stabilized, and we can assess her neurological function over the coming weeks. I nodded, keeping my face neutral, but inside a knot had formed that I couldn't untangle. Jenna's gaze on me intensified, and I realized she had seen the moment my composure slipped. Dr. Patel glanced at his watch. I should get back to the operating room. The next few hours are critical, and I need to be there. I nodded, swallowing hard. I wanted to say more, ask more, but the words wouldn't come. He gave a brief, reassuring look. We're doing everything we can. I'll update you as soon as there's news. And then he was gone. The moment the door clicked shut behind him, something inside me gave way. I sank back into the chair, shoulders trembling, and let the tension I'd been holding for hours pour out, and I cried like a baby. All the emotions of the past few weeks culminating in an ugly breakdown. Jenna was instantly at my side, arms around me, holding me tight. I didn't resist. I needed it, more than I realized. I could feel her heartbeat against mine, grounding me just enough to keep from completely losing myself. Owen crouched a little beside us, one hand on my back, awkward but determined. It's going to be okay, Craig, he said, though I could hear the worry in his voice. He had nothing to offer that would change the facts, but the effort mattered. I closed my eyes, leaning into them both, letting myself finally feel the fear, the helplessness I had been fighting to keep at bay. The afternoon turned into night and night into the next morning with no word or update. I finally rose from my chair, my legs feeling like dead weight from sitting for so long. Jenna and Owen were asleep together on what resembled a sofa near the back wall of the waiting room as I left to try to find some fresh air. Sometime later, I found a glass door leading with a sign overhead describing what lay beyond as a healing garden. I entered and sat on a bench near the center collecting my thoughts when a phone in my pocket buzzed. I wasn't sure which one it was at first since I now had three. Mine, my burner, and Alyssa's. It turned out to be Alyssa's, and I calmly answered and put it on speaker. Saying nothing, the voice started a tirade. Alyssa, you are late for your meeting. An angry voice erupted from the phone. I'm sorry, but Alyssa is unavailable. I said without emotion, my voice sounding out the exhaustion in my soul. There was a hesitation. My name is Gail Smith. With whom am I speaking? I'm Craig Harrington, Alyssa's husband. May I ask what this is about? Another pause. I am with Human Resources and am currently investigating a case that your wife is involved with. She was supposed to meet, and we have not been able to reach her. I thought for a moment on how to respond, or even if I should, but before I could process any thought, I blurted out. I am very well aware of your investigation and what it entails. I see, was her reply. I cannot give you any details about what is going on for professional reasons, but would encourage you to relay to your wife the importance of this meeting at your convenience. I understand. Not sure how to proceed. I pushed on. There is some information you should be aware of in regards to your case against Alyssa. Silence. Then, if you have information that would be pertinent to our investigation, then by all means, please continue. Alyssa is currently in the hospital undergoing emergency surgery to release pressure in her brain. There was a gasp and some murmuring in the background. The doctors involved believe that this trauma is the cause of her change in attitude over the course of the last month or so, including the inappropriate behavior and misconduct. Gail's voice came back on the line subdued. We are so sorry to hear this, and with this new information my colleagues agree that we can postpone this hearing until the outcome of Alyssa's condition is determined. Thank you, was all I could manage to mutter, then hung up. I walked back to the waiting room and reclaimed my seat and continued my vigil. After what felt like months, the door opened again, and a nurse stepped in, clipboard in hand. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on me. Mr. Harrington? She asked. I stood immediately. She's out of surgery, the nurse said, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Relief and fear collided so sharply it almost knocked me back into the chair. The surgeons were able to secure the aneurysm and relieve the pressure. The procedure went as planned. Jenna and Owen were awake by this time, and she asked, "Can we see her?" The nurse shook her head gently. "Not yet. She needs to stabilize in the ICU first. Her body has been through a lot, and the next few hours are critical for monitoring her neurological status and making sure there are no complications. Once she's stable, the medical team will let you visit." I could only manage to nod, and the nurse left, leaving us alone in the room once again. "She's through the worst part," Jenna finally replied, almost afraid of breaking the silence. The next few days blurred together into a cycle of waiting rooms, bad coffee, and quick updates from nurses. I lost track of how many times I walked the same corridor to the ICU, stared out at the hospital's little healing garden, or sat with my head in my hands while machines beeped behind the glass. Each time I was allowed in, Alyssa lay motionless under white sheets, her face pale but still, a tangle of tubes and wires snaking from her arms. Alyssa drifted awake through a fog of pain and sedatives, the world around her coming into focus in fragments. The antiseptic smell, the hiss of oxygen, the muted beeping of machines. She blinked and saw a familiar shape at her side. Jenna. Her face was tired but soft, her fingers curled gently around Alyssa's hand. "Hey," Jenna whispered, her voice breaking just a little. "You're awake." Alyssa's lips parted, but only a rasp came out. She swallowed, trying again. "Jenna." Her eyes roamed the room slowly, taking in the white walls, the forced stand, the empty chair nearby. It took a few heartbeats before she realized who she wasn't seeing. Craig. He wasn't there. The absence registered first as confusion, then as a small, sharp ache. Images flickered at the edge of her mind. The fight, her shouting, the wild edge in her own voice. The moment everything went black. Shame rose like bile as the memories slid back into place, one after another. She squeezed her eyes shut, clutching at Jenna's hand, and the thought came, cold and heavy. He's gone. He's finally had enough. "You're looking for Craig, aren't you?" Jenna said softly. Alyssa's lips moved, no sound coming. "He's not gone," Jenna murmured, leaning closer. "He's been here the entire time." Her thumb brushed over Alyssa's knuckles. "We finally sent him home to sleep a few hours ago. He wouldn't leave on his own. We made him go," she added. "We're taking turns now, so one of us can shower, eat, and sleep, and someone's always here with you." Alyssa blinked, tears welling, her grip weak but clinging to Jenna's hand. Jenna squeezed back, steady and warm. "He'll be back soon," she whispered. "You're not alone." The next day I returned to find Alyssa awake and able to speak. Upon entering the room she immediately broke down crying. "I remember everything," she said at last, her voice low but steady. "The fights, the things I said, what I did." She swallowed hard. It was like watching myself from somewhere else. Like I was possessed. I could see it happening, but I couldn't stop it. I felt out of control of my own body. Her eyes filled. "I'm so sorry, Craig. For all of it. For how I treated you. I hate myself for it. She reached for my hand, and I let her take it, her fingers trembling. I reached across and covered her hand with both of mine. Hey, I said quietly. She blinked up at me, eyes glassy. It wasn't your fault. She drew in a shaky breath, eyes flicking away from mine. There's more, she whispered. It's not just what happened between us. It's work. I know, I said reassuringly. Gail Smith called your phone, and we talked. I explained, and they postponed the inquiry until you felt better. I suspect they will drop it once all the facts come out. I sat there for a long time, her hand in mine, my stomach in knots. The words came out before I could stop them. Alyssa, did you cheat on me? She flinched like I'd struck her. Her eyes darted up to mine, then down again. No, she whispered, then shook her head quickly. No, Craig. I didn't. But her voice cracked. I tried. My grip on her hand tightened. Tried. I was so angry and reckless, she said, tears gathering in her eyes. I thought I wanted to. I wanted to hurt you, to blow everything up. I put myself in situations I never would have before. But every time, my head was so messed up, aggression, mood swings, this, darkness, that nothing actually happened. I scared people off. I scared myself off. I never went through with it. She looked up at me then, face wet, voice trembling. It's not an excuse. I still tried, Craig. I still crossed that line in my heart. And I'm so sorry. The door opened softly. Jenna stepped inside, a paper cup in one hand. She must have heard more than I realized because she didn't say hello, just looked at Alyssa with a kind of sad knowing in her eyes. You didn't cross that line because it was your heart that saved you, Jenna said gently, setting the cup down. Your head tried to take you there, but your heart didn't let you. Alyssa stared at her, trembling, and I felt a strange flicker of gratitude that Jenna had walked in at that moment. For the first time since the confession, the air in the room felt a little less heavy. 2 weeks later, I carried Alyssa's overnight bag up the stairs and into our own bedroom. The walls, the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen, even the quiet hum of the street outside. It all felt unreal after so many nights in the hospital. She eased herself down onto the bed, tired but smiling faintly, fingers brushing across the comforter like she was making sure it was really there. Little by little, normal things returned. Morning coffee, walking in the park, dinners without tension. Her voice no longer cracked. Her temper no longer flared without warning. Sometimes she still reached for my hand just to make sure it was there. I squeezed back every time. Jenna came by often, still hovering like a protective older sister. One afternoon, I overheard her low voice in the living room as she talked to Alyssa. You two get another chance. Don't waste it. Spice things up if you want, try new things, explore, but it's your relationship. Keep it between you and Craig. Don't live our life. Live yours. No one needs to know. Except me. I want all the details. She laughed. Alyssa laughed softly, the sound lighter than it had been in months. I think we've had enough secrets, she said. And don't worry, I'm not interested in living your life. No offense. None taken. Jenna leaned over and gave Alyssa a big hug. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching Alyssa and Jenna talk quietly. For the first time in a month, I felt a sense of calm I didn't think I'd ever find again. Alyssa caught my gaze and smiled, a small, real smile that didn't hide anything. I walked over and took her hand. Her fingers were warm, steady, alive. We'll be okay, I whispered. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it.